We are weaving our lives. We are weaving our hearts and our minds. We are weaving the bright and dark threads of our journeys through these.
Welcome to the Sovereignty Time podcast. Join me in Circle, where we share the experiences of womanhood from the lens of radical self-responsibility, choosing bliss and ease over victimhood and struggle. I want to know how women are claiming sovereignty, manifesting their dream lives, and thriving in motherhood, partnership, health, and wealth. We are here to share vulnerable stories, encouraging each other as we weave the light and dark threads that create the messy but beautiful tapestries of our lives. Okay, welcome to Sovereignty Time podcast. I am Hannah-Rose Giove, hostess. I'm so excited to welcome my friend Celia, who I met on the internet, and I did find her through Freebirth Society membership, but I swear that I found you on Google because I was looking up Freebirth near me or something, because it's like, what do you say, doula? It's just different. So somehow I found your website on Google, and I think that's the first time that I saw you. And I've always just been inspired by your aesthetic and the way that you did your website and just your energy. And I've seen some of the classes that you've created and programs, and I know you just had your fourth baby, and I'm just inspired by you. And, we're in the same state in California, so I just wanted to have you on to share mainly right now about your birth stories, but I would love to have chat more with you in the future about, because we were both hospital birth doulas, and I know there's a lot to hash out and chat about. So I'll let you share, where you're from and wherever you want to start. One thing I really like to hear with birth stories is little lessons or things that you learned, like the big kind of takeaway from each birth. So some births might have stood out more than others. So if you can kind of think about that a little bit as you're sharing, that would be awesome.
So much to share. We've got to do probably more episodes about relationships and mothering, because there's a whole lot there too.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Celia. Thanks for having me on. It is funny how we have connected online and stayed connected over the years, even though we live a couple hours away. We should hang out in person sometime.
I know. It's going to happen for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. You found me on Google. That makes sense. You found me on Google. I probably had some free birthy terms on my website as I was transitioning from hospital doula work to the other realm. And I think you were like looking for birth support for your second baby, right? And I think I was pregnant at the same time as you with my third baby.
Mhm.
And then you became very useful to me when I was struggling with breastfeeding, tongue tie stuff with him. And yeah, now, gosh, our paths are weaving alongside each other still.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, where did it all begin? I've been a birth nerd my entire life, I
Mm.
think. I can't remember a time that I wasn't fascinated by birth. I remember breastfeeding my little baby dolls when I was a toddler. I remember coming home after school in like middle school and watching that show TLC, A Baby Story. They're all hospital births, of course, but I was just so into it. And when I was 18, having been out of high school for like 6 months, I didn't want to go to college, but I had only one passion and I didn't know what else to do. So I went to a doula training and kind of jumped right in, and then realized very quickly this is huge. I have no idea what giving birth is like, and I never felt like I could really totally empathize with a birthing mother until I had gone through it myself. So I was still, around birth work, but that's kind of like where I started this path as a, you could say, teenager. And well, any more about myself? I'm a Berkeley native. Yeah, I have 4 kiddos now, just turned 31. I started early with the mothering and getting it done before I'm 35. And well, maybe my birth work will evolve as they get a little bit older, because right now I'm in full on mothering mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I could go into my first pregnancy and birth.
Yeah.
Shall we start there?
Yeah. Was it a home birth? I don't know.
It was. Yeah. As a doula, I was going to hospital births because that's what most people are doing, and that's where the clients are. But I always kind of had the idea that I would become a home birth midwife someday. I was born at home, and so that felt very normal to me.
Okay.
And on one hand, I could support people going to the hospital, but on the other hand, I was like, I still am like, what? This is crazy. Why are people going to this place for injured and sick people to have this natural experience? It's just bizarre to me. Of course, some people don't want to have it all natural. Some people want to have all the things, and that's totally fine. And that wasn't appealing to me. I really looked forward to just feeling it all and really experiencing it. I had this notion that, birth is maybe supposed to be this transcendent, out of body, deeply in the body, transformative experience. And I wanted that. I wanted to know myself more
Mm-hmm.
deeply. Um, and I felt safe at home, and I felt like that was the place that was going to be the least interrupted. And I was so happy to find out that one of the women I trained with in doula training had gone on to become a midwife. And so I got to have this familiar person at my birth. Yeah, prenatal care was awesome. She came to my house. It just all felt very comfortable and smooth. And I loved my first birth. I feel like it's tricky going into birth when you've already been to births, because then you have a little bit of the doula or midwife mind that you need to set aside, where you're maybe analyzing what you're feeling. And so I remember thinking to myself, like, this isn't normal. This isn't typical, when the kind of pattern of my labor went in a direction that I hadn't witnessed before. So I'll share about that. His birthday's October 1st. He just turned 7. I went into labor after a night of kind of like mild cramping and not very good sleep. The next morning I wake up, lose my mucus plug, and I'm thinking, okay, something is probably happening. We're going to hang at home. I think it was a Saturday, so it felt nice to just do nothing. And it was great. We just like ate latkes and watched Men in Black, and I waddled around and drank a lot of fluids and took a nap. It was hard to nap. I remember laying down felt terrible. But contractions like never really ramped up. It was just kind of a pattern of like 8 minutes between them, and then 7, and then 5, and then 10, and all over the place. So it was pretty mild and manageable and just annoying. So by the time the sun had gone down, I was like, what the hell? Like, is this going to happen or not? And I texted my midwife, and she suggested I have a glass of wine and get in the bath, and either it will slow down and I can go to sleep, or it will speed up and we'll have a baby. So I took her advice and finished my little glass of wine in the bath, and within a few minutes, things shifted. And suddenly the contractions were very strong and very consistent. My husband was like sitting next to the bathtub finishing work on his computer, which was fine. I did not need him to do anything. I just needed I needed company, but I was doing my own thing. I was in the zone. And actually, here's a little lesson that I got from this first birth it was very helpful in all of my subsequent births, that I went into it really clear that this is only my path to walk. Nobody can save me. Nobody is gonna make it better or fix it or come and rescue me. It was my fire walk, my path. Only I can do it. And so there's no point in looking outside of myself. Everything I need to move through this is within me. And yeah, that was just so helpful. So when it started to really ramp up, I knew I had to go into it. And the bath didn't work for very long, so I eventually got in the shower, did my thing in there for a while, went to the bed. In all of my births, one of the most helpful jobs that my husband had was just putting the towel back over my back as I'm on hands and knees. Every time it would fall off, because of course I'm swaying and moaning and yelling, and he would just put it back on. It was so perfect and comforting, and I never had the words to tell him that in the moment, but the little things really make a difference. And the reason I thought this birth was not a normal birth was because it was my first baby, and the intense part of this labor was only 3 hours. So once it ramped up, it was on. And after being on my bed for a little while, I went to go pee on the toilet. I think my midwife had arrived around this time. But I was, in the cosmos, not really registering what was going on anywhere outside of me. And so I remember I went to the toilet and my water broke very conveniently on the toilet. My midwife comes over and rests her hand on my knee, and she whispers to me, "It's gonna get more intense now." And I'm like, what the hell? This is already the most intense thing ever. And of course she was right, but it was so awesome how the intensity changed, because it wasn't necessarily more pain, but it was suddenly my body was pushing, and it felt like a bowling ball was coming through me. It was just full and heavy, and just amazing that the body can do this without any conscious effort. So the pushing phase was very short. It was 20 minutes from the time my water broke until he came out. I had migrated over to the floor on hands and knees. Spoiler alert, all of my babies have come out that same way. Hands and knees on the floor. And I just yelled him through me. And I remember saying to myself, the only way out of this is through it. The thing about this birth that maybe never sat right with me, or maybe I decided that it wasn't right later on, was as he was coming out, actually his head had come out already, and then I was waiting for another contraction to get his body out, and it wasn't coming. So it was this pause after his head was out, and my body felt done. And instead of waiting, my midwife quietly and gently stuck her hands inside of me and pulled him, and pulled and twisted. And looking back in the video is the more traumatizing part, because obviously in the moment I was just okay, this is what needs to happen. But looking back, she was really pulling, and thankfully he came out with that support in quotations. And I didn't even tear, other than a little tiny thing at the top. And yeah, he was fine and cried right away, and it was all good. But later on, looking back at that birth, I really reflected and questioned why she did that, why she thought she needed to do that. Was it even necessary? And I had a lot of bleeding after that birth, to the point where an hour after, when I got up to go pee, I fainted on the toilet, and she carried me back to bed and did all the things that one could do at home before transferring. And thankfully I didn't have to transfer, but she gave me IV fluids. She gave me a shot of Pitocin. She gave me herbs. She made me a placenta smoothie. And of course, all that fundal massage stuff. And I didn't put the pieces together until later on, but I believe now that that interruption at the end had something to do with all of that bleeding. But I had it in my head after that, maybe I'm a bleeder, maybe birth is dangerous. And that kind of haunted me going into my second birth. But I came away from that birth, on top of the world. Like, home birth is amazing. Birth in general is amazing. I'm so humbled. Like, I respect any woman. I bow down to any woman who is pregnant and gives birth in whatever way they do it, because it's a huge, huge thing to do. And really why I still am passionate about birth work, because there's nothing cooler than growing a baby and bringing it out into this world. A few years later, we were having our second babe. We were at a different house, and I was going to have the same midwife, but she was actually pregnant for the first time as well. So there was another midwife I really liked that I knew worked with her. And so I asked them to partner for my birth. And I'm so glad I did that, because towards the end of that pregnancy, my original midwife she was 5 weeks behind me, but she was, so pregnant. She was like, I'm tapping out. I just can't go to any more births, which I understood and was disappointed about, but in the end it worked out super well, because this other midwife I trusted so much and I loved her, and she turned out to be amazing, and also attended my third birth. My second birth maybe was my favorite one. Second favorite, because actually my fourth one, where nobody was there, was my favorite one. It was just so magical. I had conceived her on a full moon. I went into labor on a full moon. This labor started completely differently. I had taken a nap, and then my water broke after, oh no, I had gone pee. Then I did a forward leaning inversion off of the bed. When I sat up, my water broke. And I didn't have any contractions for a while, but it was just me and my husband and our 3-year-old. I made some bone broth soup and banana bread, and we watched My Neighbor Totoro. And as soon as we put him to bed, then the contractions really started to ramp up. So there wasn't really much of an early labor with that one. And she, from when the contractions started until she was born, was about 4 hours. So it was, yeah, there was just no wasting any time with that one. No gradual build up. It was on, and as many second babies do, just fly into the world. I had envisioned that pregnancy, that I was going to give birth in our bathroom for some reason. I don't know why I always had that picture in my head. Maybe because I really wanted to be this wild woman and be protected in my cave and not have anyone too close to me. Going into that birth, I was really clear. I did not want anyone touching me or the baby as they were coming out, because I didn't want a repeat of the first time. And I wanted to see for myself, can this baby just come out on their own, and will that make a difference with bleeding and postpartum? And yeah, I ended up on that bathroom floor yelling and roaring, and it was so intense. And I remember thinking at every point, I mean, in every labor, at a certain point, I remember thinking, just take me to a hospital and cut this baby out, or I need an epidural or something. There was a point where I would have doubt and wanting to be saved. And I learned that was a good sign that we were almost to the end. So I still remember that. And then I also remember, of course, these moments between the contractions that were so blissful, and I would want to kind of like worry about the next contraction because how, but also um I was like too blissed out to even worry about it. So I would just sink into deep softness and let those endorphins take over. And yeah, that's another thing I love about birth, that it's just so wave-like. Yeah, eventually I didn't feel the need to yell anymore. My body shifted into pushing, and I was like grunting and breathing with this like whisper sound. None of this was on purpose. That's just what was coming out of me. And it was fascinating to me that I could be so quiet and gentle. And that's just that was just her. That was her way of coming through. And I remember crouching down in this like frog-like position, and my husband's behind me putting that towel back on. And I feel her coming down, and I suddenly feel her wiggling her head like in my vagina, and I'm like, what? There's actually a baby that's about to come out of me. This is so cool. You kind of, I don't know, maybe you forget a little bit when you're just in the deep intensity of labor. So, yeah, there she came very smoothly. I remember saying to myself, nice and slow, as her head was coming through and my body was pushing, and I didn't have a whole lot of control over that. And yeah, her head came and then her body came right after. There was not even much of a pause that time. And I think my midwife was not even in the bathroom. She was like peeking her head in from the hallway, which was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. And I think that, I mean, one thing is that I'm very lucky. The way that my body births just tends to be very smooth. Like I don't have too many crazy variations of normal popping up that a licensed midwife might flag and transfer someone for or intervene for. But we talked a lot during that pregnancy about where my boundaries were and where her boundaries were. So she knew I didn't want to be touched, and she knew I didn't want Pitocin unless we tried other things first, like if I was having a lot of bleeding. Um, I I was just like, give me a spoonful of honey or some juice. There are other things, tinctures, but I didn't need any of it. She was awesome and was very quiet and respectful, and the placenta was ready to come out really soon after, and she kind of guided it out with my permission. I actually asked her to do it because I was too nervous. And it was all good, all beautiful. It was a beautiful full moon evening. Yeah, that was my daughter's birth. Just so magical. And then the third one, which they always say is a wild card. I think that might have messed with me in the pregnancy, wondering and worrying what's going to be my wild card. I think, in every birth or every pregnancy, we're in a different phase of life, and you birth how you live. And going into my third one, I was maybe more in a victim mindset at that time in my life and didn't totally realize it. I was in more pain physically and complained a lot about that. And I had a lot of fear. Also, as awesome as my births were, it's friggin' intense and painful. I was afraid to feel that pain, and every time I would think about it in my pregnancy, I would get anxious, and then I really hate feeling anxious, so I would just get like more fearful and anxious whenever I would feel that. And so I would do things to kind of counteract the anxiety or suppress it. And this is hilarious to me because I teach hypnobirthing. I have a little bit of a different outlook on that now, but I would like listen to meditations and tell myself I'm going to have this pain-free birth because I just was so afraid of the pain. And then, of course, I just brought all of that into my labor. So, um, on my first son's 5th birthday, I was joking all day long at his birthday party and my dad's block party we went to later. That'd be so funny if I go into labor tonight. And then I did. And I was not happy about it because I was so tired from all the parties that day. So we finally get the kids to bed and I take a bath and I come out of the bath and contractions start. And I'm like, no, please just let me get a good night's sleep first.
How are you?
I'm
Are
so
you
tired.
feeling like with your other children? You know, you're now a mom of 2 littles and you're in this 3rd pregnancy and you're going into labor so close to your first son's birthday. That's so funny. Same thing happened to me. Just, do you think
The same
that
thing happened to
kind
you?
of, yes, you have to hear my birth stories, but do you think that kind of played into your kind of a little bit more stressed state or fear-based state, kind of like, how am I going to handle all of this, like 3 kids? Just even for me, I remember thinking like, how do I want to have my son in the room when I give birth, or just like thinking about how all of these flying pieces come together. You know, the more kids you have, I assume it could be more on your mind of trying to figure things out or allowing it to kind of stress you out.
Yeah, for sure. There were so many factors. I mean, we had just moved to a new house and I'm a Virgo. I just like wanted to have everything in order and I was very unsettled that it wasn't. And then yeah, going from 1 to 2 kids was kind of a breeze for us and from 3 to 4 was also kind of not a big deal because we already had 3. But the from 2 to 3 transition was hard. I was afraid for sure. Like we're gonna be outnumbered now. How is this gonna work? And then of course just the stress of my son's actual friggin' birthday party. I don't like having to host parties. I'm afraid that something's gonna go wrong. I just want, everybody to have a good time and have what they need. So all of that was in the space. Yeah. I was grateful at least my son got to have his birthday party before the baby came. I was afraid of the baby coming before his birthday, and then I would be so sad that it wouldn't be, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to celebrate with him. Anyway, it happened how it happened. But yeah, I started having those contractions and I was anxious as hell. I was pacing around, feeling that like pit in my stomach, shaky. And I wasn't even, I was like in denial. I called my midwife and I'm like, I don't know if this is it. I just feel really anxious and contractions are coming, but they're not very close. And I don't know, you probably don't need to come. And we get off the phone and 30 minutes later, I call her and I'm like, I think I want you to come. And she's like, I'm already on my way. Don't worry. So also, my third birth is the first time that I had a doula. I had hired one for my first birth and she was sick and I didn't feel like calling the backup doula because I hadn't met her in person and I was already like in active labor by the time it occurred to me to call someone. So I didn't have a doula for the first one and it went totally fine. I didn't feel like I needed anyone. And so the second time I was like, we don't need it. Third time I thought, let's try it. I'll treat myself. And I had a doula friend who I really loved, and I loved her energy, and I wanted her there. So this was the most amount of people I had ever had at a birth, which maybe also played into me having a harder time. More observers more eyes, more things going on in the background. So my doula arrives first, and then the assisting midwife arrives, and then my main midwife arrives, and my husband, and we're all in my bedroom together. And later on, I thought, like, why didn't I just make them all go downstairs? They did not all need to be in my bedroom. But I watched the video and I see everyone just sitting there in my room, and I'm in bed just moaning. I kind of struggled with that one. It went really smoothly. It was longer than my other previous births. It was 6 hours from the first contraction. Still not that long, but I just resisted and resisted, and I knew that I needed to let go, and I would try to breathe myself into relaxation, but it took a long time for me to get rid of the shakes, and eventually it just built up enough that I suppose I was hitting transition at this time when I felt like my whole body was going to explode, or I was just stretching out my whole body. And I remember talking to God, even though I'm not religious. Maybe there's a God, I don't know. But I was like, God, please take me. I give up. Take me. And um and then things shifted and my body started pushing, and that was the longest pushing phase I've ever had. I spent this whole labor laying down in my bed, which is so weird to me because I never felt comfortable laying down in labor before. And I had pillows between my legs, and they were fanning me, or I was holding someone's hand. And I feel like maybe having that many people there played into me feeling like maybe I could be saved, or I reached out more than I have when there were no people there. And I felt like he was stuck. It was like my body was pushing, but I didn't feel him moving down. And eventually my husband whispered to me so sweetly between a contraction, I really think you should try getting on hands and knees. And I just whined. I didn't want to because I knew it would get more intense, and I just didn't want to. But I wanted to be done. So I went through another contraction or two laying down, and then I finally was like, all right, let's do this. So I got up and I got on the floor, and the next contraction, I felt his head move down. So I was very excited that I was almost done. Yeah, I again roared that kid into the world. I remember his head coming out and midwife sitting in the corner. Yeah, people were kind of around me in a circle, just silent, and my husband was right behind me, and the baby, my son, left my body and into my husband's hands, and I yelled, "Get out!" And there he was, and I was so relieved. But I was also a little traumatized from that birth, that it had been so hard. And then we had breastfeeding struggles. Man, that was my wild card for sure. That third one, yeah, it was all fine. And then I learned a lot from that birth too. That I learned a lot about surrender from the birth and from the breastfeeding struggles. That some things are just out of my control, and especially with the breastfeeding stuff, that it's okay to pivot and do what's going to be the best for my family and my mental health. And I was triple feeding for months, and it was horrible. It was hell. My heart goes out to anyone who is struggling. Yeah, it was so odd that I breastfed my first two easily, and then the third one just was so tricky. But I have a lot of compassion now for people going through that. And then we always wanted a lot of kids. We weren't quite planning the fourth one that soon after, but when Iman, our third one, was 11 months, we got pregnant again. And by this time, me and my husband, we were both more on board with the Freebirth train. I had done the Radical Birth Keeper School in my second pregnancy, and I was kind of like, let's do a free birth, but he was not ready for it, and I think deep down I wasn't either. But this time, he actually suggested it. I just assumed we would have our same midwife because we love her. But midwives are freaking expensive where we live, and he didn't want to pay $8,000. And so there was a lot of discussion in the beginning about, like, are we really comfortable with doing this on our own? Do we want to pay her just to, like, do hybrid care and, like, not be there for the birth or just be on call in case? And she wasn't really okay with that, so that kind of forced us to make a decision. And ultimately, we decided to just do it ourselves. I think my husband was a lot more comfortable now after catching 3 of our babies and seeing how smoothly it went, especially the second and third, with, like, no bleeding and placentas just coming right out easily. And it would be interesting to hear him do a podcast about his journey through all the births. But yeah, I was ready too. I was ready to hop on board with that, and I learned a lot through Yolanda Norris Clark, and I think that's her full name. And I took her portal course during that pregnancy, and I read her book, which was amazing. That just turned everything upside down for me. That really helped me work through the trauma and fear that I had coming from my third birth. All about pain and surrender. And I just had a new outlook on it and a new excitement to try out some, I want to say skills, but it's not even really, maybe it is skills. I would say, in her words, the discipline of surrender. I was excited to try that out in my fourth birth. And then I went and studied with Sister Morningstar and Emily Saldea on her land during that pregnancy. So I got to do, like, a deep dive into free birth in preparation, which was so amazing. And a dear friend of mine, Kate Oakley Swigard, she offered to come. And I wasn't sure if I was going to call her, but I did. Gosh, my fourth birth was just so awesome because it was everything that I chose and nothing more, nothing less. And how did it even start? I don't even remember now. Oh yeah, it was my brother's birthday. My brother's birthday. My babies like to come on significant days. My brother's birthday, we went out to dinner. I was having, like, mild contractions all day. And so I was like, something might happen tonight after dark, as it does. All my babies have come around 40 weeks. And I think this was, like, the day before 40 weeks. And everyone went to bed after dinner. And yeah, things started to kind of get moving. I guess this might be my fastest birth. I lay in bed and I listened to some meditations from Yolanda. And I am going into the sensations rather than resisting them or trying to, like, overcome them with my breath. I'm, like, using my breath to bring my awareness into the sensations and let it envelop me, essentially. And it wasn't super intense or frequent. And after a little while, I got in my head and was like, what is going on? When is this gonna happen? I'm tired. I want to go to bed. Let's have a baby or not have a baby. And I called my friend Lori Jaffe. She's also a doula and free birthy lady and innate postpartum support person. And I just start complaining to her. I'm like, nothing's happening. And she just listens to me and, validates me. And I think I just needed to get that out. And then I get off the phone with her, and Kate is on her way driving from Santa Cruz. And then, like, 15 minutes later, it's on and things are intense. And I'm on the floor, of course, on hands and knees, swaying and moaning. And my husband's napping next to me in bed. What is he gonna be doing anyway? It's perfect. Just be near me in case I need something. And I just remember with this birth, it wasn't that I didn't feel pain, but I just felt so present and so much more in control of my relationship to the sensations. So it was like just this beautiful dance. And I remember, of course, moments where I wanted to pull away or I wanted it to be over. Just having like practiced this power of choice, and just choosing it the way it was and choosing to go into the sensations more. And I really think that that made my experience better and made it go faster. Maybe. At a certain point, my water broke, and I was like, yes, it felt so good to get that pressure released. And then I was excited because I knew that my body would probably start pushing, and it did. Uh, and and I was just pushing for not very long, again, maybe 20 minutes, maybe a little longer. And by that time, Kate had arrived. She was sitting in the corner, probably giving me sips of coconut water or something, and taking beautiful photos, which I had asked her to do. I think she lit a candle literally a minute before the baby came out. I'm on hands and knees. My husband's behind me. Her head's coming down, and I'm telling her, okay, baby, nice and slow, nice and slow. And there she came. There she came out into his arms, kind of onto the floor, onto the towels. And we scooped her up. This was the first time we didn't know the sex, and my husband was very excited to announce immediately. Maybe next time, if there's a next time, I would tell him, don't say anything. I want to look myself. But I had suspected it was a girl, and
That happened to
I
me
was right.
too. Oh my gosh. We're like living in parallel universes. It's crazy.
They just can't keep their mouth shut, but I know. It's exciting. Yeah, and also one of the coolest parts of this birth for me was birthing the placenta. I had always been kind of nervous to do that myself. Like I didn't think I could, and I always had my midwife kind of do it for me. So this was like my reclamation, my next step in sovereignty and taking ownership of my birth. And it was so cool to do that myself. Like I just was paying attention to my body, and shortly after she was born, maybe I don't know, 5 minutes later, I felt a little gush of blood. I knew that was a sign that the placenta was ready. I started to feel a little uncomfortable, like I needed to move my body. I knew that was another sign that the placenta was ready. And so I handed the baby to my husband, and I kind of crouched over a bowl and grabbed onto the cord and tugged it a little bit. The placenta just slid right out into my hands over the bowl, and it was like warm and beautiful. And I just had to check it out in that moment. So I was like, moving the amniotic sac off of part of it, and it just felt amazing to hold it in my hands. And uh I can't even really explain it with words. It is a birth, it's another birth, and then the birth is complete once you do that. Gosh, yeah. In the free birth world, it feels very like anti-licensed midwife, which I understand completely because they are really restricted and limited by their licenses. And I've never felt like extreme in one way or the other. I mean, obviously I'm like extreme home birth, but I had good experiences with licensed midwives. I've had really hands-off, respectful experiences with them. And I chose free birth like freely, not out of fear. Um, and it just went so beautifully and smoothly. And, of course I had fears going into it. of what if something goes wrong, but I had an amazing community to work through that with. A lot of practice in knowing what true fear is versus like illogical kind of anxiety. And I trusted my body, and it was awesome. And now she's here, and we have 4, and my other 3 kids adore her, and she's just such a happy, chill little baby.
How old is she again?
She's 4 months now.
Okay. That's so cute. I know you have to go, but I just wanted to ask just like in a little conclusion. So this last birth compared to your other births with, the portal class and the portal book and all of the other things that you've learned, do you think you would describe it as
That
more blissful and orgasmic than versus painful?
I've heard of lots of different experiences from women who have read the book or done her course. Some have certainly been pain-free and blissful. I would not say that my birth was pain-free and blissful. I don't think it felt blissful at the time. Gosh, it was completely different than any birth that I had been through before, and completely different than what I was taught in the world of hypnobirthing. I mean, really, I recommend everybody should grab the book and read it. But what really stuck with me is that the key is surrender, and that surrender isn't just like something you stumble upon. Like it is a discipline.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing, because that means we all have access to it. It just takes that choice, that
Mm-hmm.
awareness, that choice, and the practice of that discipline. And of course, we can use that in all areas of our life. Not mastered that with my kids yet, but
Yeah, surrender was the word that was coming through to me when you were describing your fourth birth. It just sounded like that was more of where you were with moving through the contractions. So yeah,
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I
yeah,
love her book Portal. I highly recommend it to everybody. And it's not just birth, it's choice. We're choosing everything. And it's our whole lives. So it's applicable to anybody. It's amazing. I love it so much. I'll link it in the show
for
notes.
sure. Yeah, it's not just a birth book, but it is very handy for birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Well,
for having me on. It's crazy to go through all 4 births in such a short time. I hope that people enjoy these little short stories.
yeah, thank you for sharing. It was fun to hear because I honestly didn't know, especially about like the first two. It's fun to see how you came to find and choose free birth too. That's always like a fun little journey.
Yeah, yeah. It's different for everyone. I love hearing those stories. I've got to hear your birth sometime. Have you shared yours on the podcast?
No, I haven't. Yeah, I think I feel I'm definitely gonna share. I think I might just do solo episodes or something because I'm in this weird place with, do I have other women interview me or do I just do solo episodes? And I guess it just feels easier to do the solo ones because we all have young kids. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old also, and life is so crazy and busy. And it's
Yeah,
like even just taking this time right now to share our stories. It's a special thing when you have so much going on in life.
indeed.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
for taking the time and definitely want to chat more. And we will definitely hang in person one day. And I have not been to Matriarch Rising Festival and I definitely want to get there. So hope maybe we'll be
I
there
haven't been there
together.
either, but I'm wearing the shirt. Maybe we'll see each other there next year.
Yeah, that would be amazing. We'll bring a Cali crew. That'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day. Talk to you later. If you enjoyed this podcast, please support by subscribing, reviewing, downloading, and sharing with your friends. The intro song is Weaving Our Lives by Alexa Sunshine Rose.